It is supposed to be the most magical night of the year, a night where children struggle to sleep, waiting for the sunrise, waiting for gifts, waiting for joy. But for the Sodder family, sunrise would not bring joy. It would bring a nightmare that would last for more than 70 years. In Fayetteville, West Virginia, a house stood warm and full of life. Inside were George and Jennie Sodder and 9 of their 10 children. By the time the sun rose on Christmas morning, that house would be a pile of ash. 5 of the children would be gone, but they didn't die in the fire, because when the smoke cleared, there were no bodies. To understand the horror of what happened, we must first understand the love that was lost. George Sodder was a hard-working Italian immigrant who had built a good life for his family. He owned a trucking company. He was respected in the community. That night, the house was chaotic in the best possible way. The older boys were working. The younger ones were laughing and playing. Marion, the eldest daughter, had bought small toys for her younger siblings. They weren't expensive, but to the children, they meant everything. The children begged their mother, Jennie, to let them stay up late. They wanted to play just a little longer. Jennie looked at the clock. It was late, but it was Christmas. She finally agreed, telling them to feed the cows and close the chicken coop before coming to bed. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and little Betty, the 5 of them stayed downstairs. The lights were on. The air was warm. It was the picture of a perfect family Christmas. Jennie went upstairs with the younger children. George was already asleep. The house grew quiet. At 12:30 in the morning, the phone rang. Jennie woke up and went downstairs to answer it. On the other end was a woman's voice she didn't recognize. The woman asked for someone Jennie had never heard of. In the background, there was laughter, glasses clinking. It sounded like a party. Jennie told her she had the wrong number. The woman laughed, a strange, sharp laugh, and then she hung up. Jennie went back to bed, but something bothered her. The lights downstairs were still on. The curtains were open. The front door was unlocked. The children who had stayed downstairs were nowhere to be seen. She assumed they had fallen asleep on the couch or gone up to the attic bedroom without turning off the lights. She locked the door. She turned off the lights. She went back to sleep. About an hour later, a loud bang hit the roof, like something heavy crashing down. Then a rolling sound. Jennie woke up again. This time, it wasn't the phone. It was the smell of smoke. She shook George awake. They ran into the hallway. The staircase, the only path to the attic where the children were supposed to be, was already a wall of fire. George screamed their names. He grabbed the children he could reach, Sylvia, John, George Jr., and the baby, and ran outside into the freezing night, barefoot in the snow. They stood in the yard, staring up at the burning house. They waited to see faces in the attic window. They waited to hear screams. There was nothing, just fire. George ran for the ladder he kept against the house every single day. It was gone. He ran to his coal trucks. If he could drive one close enough, he could climb on top and reach the window. The first truck wouldn't start. The second one wouldn't either. Both had worked perfectly the day before. George Sodder stood helpless in the snow, watching his home burn, believing his 5 children were dying inside. He had no idea that the real nightmare wasn't that they were dying. The nightmare was that they might not have been there at all. By morning, the house was gone. Only a blackened scar remained where a family home had stood. Neighbors gathered in silence. Some whispered prayers. Others couldn't meet George and Jennie's eyes. The fire chief said the fire had been so intense, so fast, that nothing and no one could have survived. 5 children, everyone said, were lost in the fire. But Jennie couldn't accept it. She knew something was wrong. She had read about fires before. She knew bones don't simply disappear. Even animals burned in open fires always leave something behind. But in the ruins of the Sodder home, there were no bones. No fragments. Notice. Nothing. Officials claimed the heat had cremated the bodies completely. Experts would later say that was nearly impossible. Jennie began her own experiments, burning animal bones in stoves and open fires. Every time, something remained. If her children had died in that house, where were they? As George and Jennie replayed the night over and over, more details stopped making sense. The missing ladder was found the next day, thrown down an embankment far from the house. The trucks had no clear mechanical reason for failing, and the phone lines hadn't burned. They had been cut. One strange coincidence could be bad luck. All of them together felt like something else entirely. Witnesses began coming forward. One man said he saw someone watching the fire quietly, then walking away. Another woman claimed she saw balls of fire thrown onto the roof earlier that evening. Most disturbing of all, someone reported seeing children inside a car near the scene, watching the house burn, before the vehicle drove off into the darkness. To the town, it was a tragic fire. To George and Jennie, another possibility took shape. Their children hadn't died. They had been taken. For most families, a fire is an ending. But for the Sodders, it was the beginning of a lifetime of searching. How do you bury a child without a body? How do you grieve when every unanswered question sounds like hope? They begged authorities to investigate. They asked for federal help. They were told to move on. They refused. George built a massive billboard along Route 16. 5 faces stared back at passing cars. 5 names. And one haunting question: what was their fate? For decades, the billboard stood, a silent refusal to let the children be forgotten. Then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, Jennie received a letter. No return address. Inside was a photograph. A young man in his 20s. Dark hair. Strong features. On the back were the words, "Louis Sodder. I love Brother Frankie. Ill boys." A 90132. Louis had been 9 years old when the house burned. If he had survived, this is what he would look like. Jennie was convinced. They hired investigators. One followed a lead to Kentucky and never reported back. The photograph was added to the billboard. Now the question wasn't just what happened. It was whether the children were still alive. George died in 1968. Jennie lived in mourning until 1989. She never stopped believing. The billboard eventually came down, but the mystery never did. In the end, the Sodder case is not just about a fire. It is about not knowing. Not knowing if your child is dead, or somewhere out there, alive, calling someone else family. Some mysteries keep you awake because you want answers. This one keeps you awake because you're not sure you can bear the truth.